Today, we're going to be building an application using COVID-19 data. The data that we're going to be using will come from John Hopkins University. The data can be found on the John Hopkins GitHub page, which I'll be linking below. Here's our application that we'll be building. At the very top, we're going to have the total number of confirmed cases of COVID-19. Below, we're going to have a table that represents all the countries and the total number of confirmed cases for each country. In this table over here, we'll be able to sort that information by clicking on the country, or sort by total over here and see which countries have the most. In addition to that, we'll be able to click on a row of a country and have them appear in our list over here, and then create a chart. With that chart, we'll be able to click on the countries, add them to the chart, and they get highlighted yellow below here. And then up above, we can see a pie chart representing the total number of confirmed cases against other countries so that we can do a comparison to see how those countries stack up against each other over here. Kind of a cool feature as we go forward with this application. Of course, you can always do improvements. We could add a feature over here to unselect all the countries instead of having to manually go through and unselect them. But you can always make improvements on applications. So next, we'll be diving into the code and how you can get that data. We are going to be starting with a blank canvas. So with your terminal open or your command prompt, go ahead and type npx create react app, and I'm going to be calling this application COVID-19. So we'll go ahead and allow that to create our application. All right, now that we have our application created, we can simply go ahead and switch into that directory and get our code running, or simply we can open up Visual Studio Code. If you want to, you can type code and then the name of the directory that we'll be opening up and hit enter. And that will open up your code editor, which I have opened over here already. The code editor that I have right here open is Visual Studio Code. And what we'll be doing over here is just making sure their application is in a good state and working. So over here, I'm just going to do npm start, get our application running in this window over here, just to make sure that we're in a good state. So I'll start up, and there we are. We're running in a good state, and the application is ready to go. So to kick this application off, before we get into getting the data, let's kind of just set up our default application with what we need for it. So for this application, we're going to be using Bootstrap and Axios. What I'll do over here in our terminal is I'm just going to go ahead and add Bootstrap and add Axios, which we'll be using later on. So let's do an npm install. So we can just do npm I, Bootstrap, and Axios that we want to install inside of our application. And then once we get those installed, we can go over here, and what we're going to do is find our app.js over here. We'll delete everything. Well, before we delete anything, let's do this. Let's go to index.js. Let's go ahead and import Bootstrap /distribution/css/bootstrap.min.css. Once we have this imported and in the right directory, we'll see that it refreshes over here, and now it says src app.js is all of a sudden pink. Before that, it was just white. So we know that Bootstrap is working. Or at least that's how I know that Bootstrap is working typically, is that I see the styling change on this first page. We're going to just dive into our app.js for now, and let's just go ahead and remove all that HTML that we have in the render method. At the moment, we'll get an error on the right hand over here on our browser. And what we're going to go ahead and do is let's just go add a brand new folder, and that brand new folder will be called components. So a little bit of a typo over there, components. And inside of components, let's go add a new file, and let's go add a loading.jsx. So when our application starts up, just like we have in this sample over here, we'll get a loading spinner when the app starts. I don't have that application running at the moment, but to show you that, let's do this over here. We're going to add our default components. Actually, let's go ahead and do that as an IMR like that, and we'll do this as a stateless functional component. no point making it a full-blown component. And then what we're going to do over here is we'll just type loading. And then over here, in order to get this to work, we're going to get the Bootstrap. And we will go there to get bootstrap.com. Go to the documentation, and then we can just find loading or spinners. When we find that spinner over here, we get some awesome HTML that's already been produced for us. So we can take that HTML over here into the loading spinner, paste that in, and all we have to do is rename the classes over here. So I highlighted class, and then I hit Control D or Command D on a Mac, and then right, and then I have two cursors on the screen, so I can just type name, and there we are. So our application right now still won't be running because we left it in an error state. So come back to the app over here, and if we say loading like that, I'm expecting my autocomplete to kick in, but it's not. So what we'll do is we'll add loading over here. And then I'll just go ahead and import loading from /components/loading. And there we are, we have a loader on our screen. So what we'd like to do is create an application that will follow this structure based on the application that I showed you earlier. We're going to have an app, and then we'll have a component called COVID. The COVID component will contain a loading spinner that will appear when the application first starts. And then when we get data, we're going to have a country table, and we're going to have a chart that we can also display when you select certain countries. Once we get this working, so over here, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and create a new file. We'll create a covid.jsx page. And this page will set up as a full-fledged component. And what we'll do over here is we'll use cc COVID. So there we are, we got our COVID component. And then inside here, we're going to put a div. And then inside of here, this time, there we go, we got our loading. Coming back to our application, it looks no different than before because we actually have not loaded that component yet. But you will see that it will look no different than it did because we're loading the same data, just we have another layer of abstraction, which is our COVID component. We dive into our COVID component, there we are, we have loading. And from here, we could simply just put a title that says COVID. And there you are, we have a title and then some text that's just spinning. A spinner on the screen over here. So once we have this, our next step is to go ahead and get the data. As I mentioned earlier, the COVID-19 data will be coming from the John Hopkins GitHub page. Over here on the John Hopkins GitHub page, which I'll be including below in the links, they have actually several different branches. They have the master branch over here, which has quite a bit of data, but is not updated as frequently. The data that we're concerned with is the web data branch. Inside the web data branch, there's a folder called data. In that folder, we have case, country, CSV. So these are comma separated value lists. Now, like connecting to an API, we are going to go get that information and then we'll be parsing that information. We won't be getting back JSON information. We'll be getting back text that is in the format of a comma separated value list. So that comma separated value list looks like this. GitHub does this awesome thing where they display it in a table for you. But this isn't the real data that you actually get. This is a representation of that data. So by clicking on raw, we get the actual data that you will be getting. The first column is the header information. And then each and every column below that represents a row of data. As we can see, each country is separated onto its own row, and then every single comma represents a new column of information that we have over here. So we're concerned with the country name right over here, and that's the first column. And then one of the columns over here in the middle is confirmed, and that comes right after the lat and long. And we're concerned with that column and the numbers that are contained there. Retrieve that data over here, we're going to jump into our COVID component that we have open. our COVID component over here. So let's go ahead and component did mount. We're going to go add that event right there. And component did mount right over here. Let's go ahead and add a URL for application. So URL is going to be equal to, and the URL information that we're interested in for the COVID-19 data will come from over here. We'll grab that URL, which is basically this location inside of the repository. We're going to grab that information, come over here, and put down a URL. So that's the URL that we'll be using to retrieve our COVID-19 data. Now, I'll remind you, it's coming back in a CSV list, so we need to do a little bit of parsing in order to get that to work. So let's go ahead and use axios for our data connections here. So we'll do axios from axios right there. And there we go. We have our axios object. You could also use HTTP fetch, JavaScript fetch and that. I just prefer to use axios. I find it a little bit easier. And this is going to be an async method that we're going to be using. So I'm going to put async over here. And then we will go ahead and get that information from that URL. So in order to get that information, we're going to do a const result, or actually response is equal to await axios.get, giving it this.url. And that will go ahead and get us that information. So let's go over here and open up the console, clear out the console. And we'll do a console.log response, make sure we're getting that information correctly. So here we are. We get our response object back, and that response object has the data, which is the string of text that we want. A status code of 200 letting us know that everything's okay and good. So using that, we can go response.data, get that information, and there we are. We have all of that text information for us to consume. So the next step would be that we want to split this data up into rows of data. As I mentioned, every single new line is a new row of data. So in order to get that working properly over here, what we'll do is we'll say const rows equals response.data.split, and we will split on a new line. So backslash n represents a new line of information. And then we will say console.log, print out all the rows. There we are. We have an array with 187 items, and each item is a string of text. So our next goal is to get that data into columns of information. In order to do that, what we will do over here is we could take, just as a little test over here to make sure that we're doing it correctly, what we'll do is we'll define, actually we'll print out this. So console, oops, I will get that right. There we go. Console.log, and we say rows, and we're just going to get the first row over there of information. Go ahead and take that information, split it on comma, print that out over here, and we see have 14 columns of information. So there's all our headers: country, region, last updated, long lat. So that's all the header information. If we move on to the next row of information, we get Australia, the last updated date, the long, the lat, the number of confirmed cases, 6547, and all of that information is now easy for us to consume and even easy for us to read. To continue to consume this information, what we'll do next is we'll provide a little for loop. We're going to loop through that information, through every single row of information, and collect all the countries and also get a total for all countries. So over here, let's just go ahead and create a for loop. We'll say let I equal to, and we're not going to say column or row 0 because that's the header information. We're not be collecting that. So we'll start at row 1, and And we'll say, well, I is less than length. Oh, I is less than, oh, need a semicolon. I is less than rows.length. Then I plus plus. We have our little loop that we want to set up. So step one, let's go do what we just did a second ago. We're going to say const, the current row is going to be equal to rows. So that's the row that we're on, row I. Then we'll do a split, and we can split on comma. So this over here, this solution of splitting on comma is great because it means that every row of information will be correct. But we have one little caveat with this information, is that within this data over here, which this is doing it properly, but if we look at the raw data and we find Korea, Korea has a comma, so Korea, comma, south over here, and it's inside of quotes. So what I simply did is I looked up a regular expression that would help me with comma separated values and ignoring any commas that appear inside of a quote, which is a common thing to escape data. So to escape that over here, this is a Google search that I did, and I will put that regular expression. All you really need to know is that we are splitting on comma with the exception of one row of data that contains a quote. So to do that, we put this regular expression in, and all we really need to know is we are splitting on comma, or even just put a comma, splitting on a comma. So that's what we're really doing over here. The next thing we want to do is once we have our row, it's really simple for us to collect the country name from the first index from 0 inside of that list. If we look over here, country name is featured at position 0. To get the confirmed, we just go 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So position 4 is our total number of cases. So const total equals row, and then go to column 4, and that gets us our total. Now, if we go ahead here and simply just take our data, as soon as I spell that correctly, console.log, and we print out all the country names, what we'll notice is there's one extra line of information that contains an empty row of data. It doesn't have a country name. So when we're collecting this information over here, what we're going to do is check if that country name is not equal to an empty string. And if it's not equal to an empty string, then what we can do is we can construct an array outside of our for loop where we will store all the countries that we collect. So over here, we're gonna, we will go const countries is going to be equal to an empty array. And then we'll also collect an all country total, which we'll set to 0 initially. So we have an empty array of countries and a complete total of every single country and all the confirmed cases over here equal to 0. So inside our if statement over here, what we'll do is say countries.push, and we will push a new country on here, and we'll define an object that we're going to create. We'll give it a country, a name, and that name will be equal to country name over here. And then below the name, let's also collect the total, and the total will be equal to total. So there we are, we've collected the name and the total. Then as we said, we're also going to collect the total number of cases as one variable that we're going to store. So inside of our if statement, right over here, we can say all country total plus equals the total that we just collected. So we're just going to continue to append the total that we collect from every row of data and add that. And then from every row of data, we're going to collect the country and push that into this array over here. So this is the start of our application and the start of the data that we've collected. One cool thing that we can do to confirm that we have all the right data is we can use this console.table, which can take an array of objects that are and print them out in a nice little table inside of your console. So check out this cool trick. We will do countries, print that out over here. And check this out. We have this developer functionality, you could say, in our developer console. And we've printed out a list of tables over here, which is pretty neat. So we have a name and a total. Oh, and look, we found a mistake over here. Our total actually comes in as a string. So we need to take that string and make it into a number. Otherwise, let's check this out. If we take a look at our all country total right here, console.log, and print out that total at the bottom of the screen. Look at that. That is definitely not the total number that we're looking for. We're looking for a number that's somewhere more decent. Hopefully never get to a number like this, but whatever this number is, it's a little absurd because all it's done is concatenate strings together instead of adding numbers together. To fix that, we just need to make sure that when we grab our value from the comma separated value list, that we convert it to a number. So just put number over here, wrap that row for number, or wrap that row for value in a number. And then over here, we get our correct value. And we can also see from our table, those numbers are no longer in quotes over here beside the country name. Our next step is to go ahead and now collect this information so that we can use it. So we've collected this information, we've shown that it works. Let's go ahead and add some state to our application. We're going to be using this information to show it on the screen. So over here we have our state. Inside of our state, let's go ahead and add a countries list, just like we collected below. And inside that countries list, we'll make it equal to an empty array. And let's also collect a total that we'll put over here. So this is our all countries total. We could make that more descriptive and actually call that all country total right here. So countries, all country total. Anybody who's never seen this application before and is reading the code for the first time, this would be really clear to them, instead of just having a variable called total. So if we go scroll down over here, once we've done our for loop, all we need to do now is say this, making sure that we are in the correct place. So that's our for loop. Yes, so just directly outside our for loop, this dot set state, and we're going to be setting our state to a list of countries. And the all country total over here will be equal to our all country total. So here's a cool little trick. We have our values coming in. We're setting the state. We said this value is going to be equal to this value, and this value is going to be equal to this value. Well, what's really interesting is that the spelling is the same on the left side and the right side. So cool little trick to minimize this amount of code, or what's on the screen here, is we can create objects by just saying, hey, use this as the name and the value, and it will do that over here. So we have countries and all country total, opposed to having a left side and a right side. And if they're the same name, you don't need to define both sides. So you can just remove those like that. Now that we set our state over here, let's go ahead and start using this information to build out our screen. So first things first, let's go ahead and add a title on the screen. So one thing we can do over here is we just kind of have our H1. I'm going to go ahead and style that H1. Just using some inline styles to make sure that we align that so that it's just aligned center on the screen, kind of like we had in our application over here. So here we are. And it's saying COVID, we'll say all country total. And there we are, all country total. And then beside all country total, what we have over here is, let's display from our state. And over here in the render method, what I'll do is I'll do a const. and we'll have all country total is going to be equal to this dot state. So we're extracting or deconstructing the properties that we require from the state object to use. Over here, we're going to grab the all country total, put the all country total over here, paste it in, and there we are. So that information loads in. We still have our spinner showing, but we're gonna get to that as we start to display our table of information. But we do have this label now at the top of the screen to display our total. Now that total could look so much better if it was formatted. So over here, I'm going to be pasting in a little function called numberWithCommas that uses the replace method with a regular expression that's defined over here. And I'll be including this in the code that I upload, and I'll also include this in the comments of the video. So all this does is over here globally replace all the numbers and find the patterns that it requires in order to make our number look nice. So numbers with commas, once we collect that information over here, what we can do is go down over here. So number with, oh, sorry, we need to use this dot number with commas. There we are, and we get our IntelliSense. And there you go, all country total. We have the country, we have the nice little commas there so that we can easily read that number without having to count how many places or how many digits there are before figuring it out. Next, we're going to go ahead and make sure that spinner goes away as soon as we load data. In order to do that, we're going to have to do a little if statement inside of our JSX right here. So inside the JSX, we'll wrap that loading over there, and then we will check right here the all country total. If it's equal to 0, so triple equals right there. If it's equal to 0, we will show the loading. Otherwise, we will, at the moment, put a div over here, and that div will just simply say got data. And got data right there will display and replace our spinner. So in the application first loads up, we get that spinner. The only negative right now is that information is super quick, which is awesome if you're building an application right now. That data is fast and loads very fast in your application. However, if we want to simulate this being a little bit slow, so right before we call setState over here, what I will do is I will await a new promise. I'm going to create a new promise, and this is kind of an interesting little technique here to do something that you would typically do in other languages such as a Thread.sleep and make the application wait for a little bit. What I'm going to do over here is inside this promise, we're going to have a callback, and that callback over here we'll call setTimeout, and setTimeout after a period of, we'll say 1 second, we'll then load the page. So we'll put X over here. X will be the promise that we pass in, and setTimeout after a period of 1 second, we'll call X, and X will then allow the promise to continue to the next line. And if we spell promise correctly, that will work. So right over there. So if we load that page, 1 second, and then we got our data, and it says got data on the screen. You can also notice at the very top, it says all country total is equal to 0. So that's a cool little trick that you can use when you're in your development environment to simulate what in other languages they call a Thread.sleep, or just waiting on this line for 1 second. We could wait on this line for 2 seconds, 10 minutes, whatever we want, and then it would move on to the next line of code. So we wait 1 second before calling setState. So what we've done so far is we're just displaying got data. What we'd like to do is display this information in a tabular format, a table. That table that we want to create over here in components, we can go ahead and create a new component, and we'll call this the country table.jsx, and we'll just create a component over here, cc, and then country table. Hit escape to get rid of the double cursors. And then if we wanted to, what we can do is go back to covid.jsx over here. And I'm just going to cut what we have right there for the moment. And then we'll just put country table right there. Oh, did that auto import? I was not watching. Country table, there we are. There we are. So it should have auto imported for us when I hit tab. And there it is, it says country table. So our country table, we need to go inside there because now it doesn't exist. I haven't even hit save on this file yet. Right over here inside the return statement, I'm going to paste the JavaScript that we had earlier. And once again, it says got data. So this component country table needs information. To get that information there, what we'll do is from our COVID component, and back in our diagram over here, COVID is holding all of the data. So it will then pass data down into the country table component. Inside of the country table component, it will then use its properties to get that data. So over here, going back to COVID, inside of our render method, we have the all country total. We also know that this object has a list of countries. That list of countries will pass to the country table over here, and we'll just call it countries is equal to, and there's the data that we're going to give it is equal to countries. So country table is going to have a property. So go back to the country table over here. We do not need state for this object. So inside the render method over here, we're going to say const countries is equal to this dot props. So now we're destructuring, but instead of destructuring from the state object, we're destructuring from the props object to get that list of countries. And then what we want to do is display all those countries on the screen. So if we're just going to hit save over here, confirm our application is still working, and it is. Going back over here, let's go ahead and create a table. So we are going to be using a Bootstrap table, and we're going to use some properties to make it look nice. So let me just show you real quick where you get that information from. Always important to know how these things are coming from and where I'm getting the information. And I'm just getting this from Bootstrap. Go to Bootstrap, go to documentation, get this little nice search bar. If you're not sure what you're looking for, just type it in. If not, browse through the different menu items they have over here for any components you're interested in. So for me, I'm interested in the table component. Oh, let's go type table over here. Go to tables. And you can see that we have different ways of formatting tables here. What I am interested in is a striped table. So something like this, striped rows, that's what I want. Alternating color for every single row of data that I have. So let's go ahead over here, and I am going to define a table. And then inside of that table, we'll put our, without those brackets, that will not be working very well. So these brackets, the parentheses, they allow you to go on multi-lines. Without those parentheses, your JSX will not work when you go on multiple lines. So when we go T head over here, and then what I will try doing over here is some Zen coding, TR, TH, and then what I want to do over here is times 2, if I do that right, and there we are. I get 2 rows of data, just a little shortcut for coding. We have a TR and then, a class of TH. What I meant to do was put an angle like this. Go back over here, TH times 2, hit comma, and there we are. Now I have 2 THs inside of my row. So we have 2 headers. So I want to have a country over here name, and then I also want to have a total for each country. So going back to our React application over here, you can see I have my table information, a country, and a total. For that table, like I said, we are going to be using a striped table. So I'm going to put a class name, put some quotes, and then if we go over here, you can see it says table and table striped. Right there, table striped. Go back to React and look at that, our table looks nicer already. I am going to go back first into my COVID application over here. And for our promise that we added in our component did mount, I'm just going to reduce that to 500. So half a second. That's what 500 milliseconds is right there, just so it's a little bit quicker. Inside of our country table, we have our t head over here, and now we need our t body to build out the other part of our table. And then this is where we're going to be mapping our rows of information. So right here inside of our t body. Now that we've collected our countries over here, oh, and I misspelled that, so countries, otherwise that would not work. So there we go, we got our countries. And then inside of here, we go countries. Oh, we'll need to put curly braces inside those curly braces. Countries, countries.map. And then inside of the map function, we're going to be mapping each country. So there's our country is going to be equal to country. And then inside of country over here, what we're going to do is simply just return tr. And then inside of that tr, we're going to have a td, which is going to represent our country name. So we want the country.name. And then I'm going to duplicate that line of data right there and rename. Oh, it would have been quicker maybe to type it. There we go. Total, country.total. So now we have our country total and name, but it appears we've run into an error over here. Cannot read property map of undefined. So somehow my countries list is undefined right over here. So we're getting them from our properties, getting our countries. So going back to our COVID application over here, checking where our countries come from. So there's countries. We pass it in over here. Oh, and there's that same typo that I had earlier. So it continues. There we are. Now we have all our countries typo free. There we are. Go back to our country table. And now we have all of our information displaying. You'll notice that we also have this error over here that says each child in a list should have a unique key property. So since all our countries are uniquely named, I'm going to go ahead and create a key, which is only used by React. And over here, I'm going to use the country name as a key, and that'll get rid of that red message. Let's also go clean up these unused variables that we have here. So in app.js, we are not using the logo and we're no longer using the loading there. Clean those up, and then you can see that our application is a little bit cleaner now. And we have all of our countries displaying, and we have our total on the screen. The next bit of functionality that we're going to implement is being able to sort on the total and being able to sort on the country. The information that we get is already sorted by country name, but once we sort it by total, the country name won't be sorted anymore, and we'll have to have the ability to sort it again. So to get started, what we need to do is go back to our covid.jsx over here, and then on our countries table component, we're going to be adding an on sort by total event, and we're going to respond and listen to that with this dot handle on sort by total, and handle on sort by total over here. What we'll do is implement it just below our render method. It can really go anywhere inside this class, but we'll just put it there. And we're going to say that's equal to a function. And that function, since we're going to be making these over here with an anchor tag, which is a link, normally when you click on a link, it navigates to another page. We want to prevent that, that event from happening. So we want to prevent the default behavior of a link. We're going to say links, you don't go anywhere. So in order to do that, we have to say event.prevent default, and that will prevent that default behavior of a link wanting to go to another place. So once we have this implemented over here, what we're going to do is we're going to make a copy of the countries array. Then we're going to sort that information. And after we sort that information, we will then set the state. So let's go ahead and do that. So what we're going to do here is say const countries is equal to, and that new list of countries, we're going to say copy all the countries that are in this.state.countries. And that's what this operator does here. This is called the spread operator, ... The spread operator essentially takes all the objects that are in the array and takes them out. And then what we do is we put them inside of a new array. That's why we put these brackets around it. So essentially making a copy of that countries array. Then on countries, we call a special method called sort. This sort method, as you can see over here, takes in a function. That function takes in two parameters, two items that it's going to compare. In our example, in this, it'll compare two numbers for a line item. It'll compare this number and say which is greater than the other. And it'll go through every single list of two pairs and comparing and figuring out which order these items go in. So let's go ahead and do that. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to define a new function called sort by total. The sort by total function will define just above our handle on sort by total. And over here, let's go sort by total is going to equal to a function, and that function over here, as we talked about, is going to take in two parameters. It's going to take in country A, because that's what we have in our array. Our array has a list of countries, and country B. Then we will say if country A dot total is less than country B dot total. Well, with this, we want to return something. The information we want to return is based on three things. When you implement a comparison method, you want to return three different outcomes. One, they're both equal. So if both objects are equal, we return 0. That means both objects are equal to each other. If one object is greater than another object, then we return 1 because they're greater. Otherwise, we return -1 saying it's less. So over here, I'm going to say if I'm going to do the opposite because I'm going to say country B is greater than country A total. What we'll do is return 1 because I want this list to be descending. Then we'll say else country B dot total is less than country A dot total, then return -1. Oops, misspelled return over there. Or perhaps I didn't. Oh, where's the typo over here? Let's see. Oh, else if. That is why. So right over there, forgot my else if. And then what we'll do over there is we're just going to assume that at this point, if one's not greater than the other and one's not less than the other, then therefore they are equal to each other. Okay, so we've implemented our sort by total over here. The last thing that we need to do is say this dot set state. And then inside set state over here, we're just going to give it the list of countries and update the list of countries. So copy the list, sort the list, and then set the state. Okay, so in our countries table, we've now specified that there's an on sort by total event that we can execute when we need to. So now we're passing it as a property. We'll go into our country table. And in our country table, when we extract our props over here, we'll extract the on sort by total. And then on the total over here, as I said, we're going to add an anchor tag, and that anchor tag will just make equal to any location that we want that's valid. It doesn't matter because we're preventing the default behavior of our anchor tag. We'll take our anchor tag over here and put that there. Then we'll take our on sort by total, and we're going to listen to the click event of that anchor tag. And when that click event fires, we will execute the on sort by total event over here, the property that we get back. So now you can see our total is an anchor tag, and if I click on that anchor tag, it sorts that information. I'll refresh that page there so you can see it again. Click that button and we're sorting our info. Next, we'll implement sorting by country. So sorting by country name over here, what we're going to do is pretty much copy the same functionality that we just had for the total. So over here, I'm going to add an anchor tag. And then right after the country over here, we'll go ahead and close that anchor tag. And then instead of on sort by total, we'll call this on sort by country name. Actually, we'll just call it on sort by name. No, country name. And then on sort by country name over here, what we're going to do is say comma on sort by country name. We'll take this property over here that we're passing in, and we're going to go implement that on the country table that we have right here. Grab the on sort by country name, say this is equal to, and then this dot handle on sort by, and then we're going to say country name. There we go. And then the handle on sort by country name is not implemented right now. So let's go up over here and implement that method. You can see we already had the link over here, so looking pretty good. This will be pretty simple. What I'm going to do is pretty much copy what we got over here for sorting by total. The functionality is very similar. Kind of a bad practice though that there's so much similarity among these. We can definitely refactor this. For the purposes of this example though, I will just kind of keep them like this, but know that you can make this code better because the only real difference will be over here, the sort by total. We're going to call this sort by country name. And that's pretty much the only difference between these two methods is this one line over here and the sort function that we're going to be using. Same thing that goes for this list over here. I'm going to say sort by total, copy that. We're kind of just grouping these two together right here. And then instead of saying country total, we're going to do it by country name. And I've tried this before. So right over here, I'm just going to actually, what I'm going to do is select total right there, hit Command D, Command D, Command D, or Control D, Control D, Control D on Windows. You can see I got 4 cursors. Those 4 cursors over there, I'm using them to delete where it says total and then typing in name. And then in addition to that, the one that says B, I'm going to do this here. I'm going to do B over here is, let me see, we're going to see, let me just double check this here. Yes, okay. So we'll say country A name is greater than country B name, right there, return 1. And then if country A is less than country B name, return -1, right there. And this function, I haven't renamed it yet. So I need to rename that to sort by, not company, country. And then sort by country name. And there you go. So let's try sorting by total. Let's sort by country. And we get this weird, what happens is the reason that Korea shows up first is that it has a quote, and quote will come before an A. Also, this doesn't really look good for the data that we're displaying. So what we can do is go make sure that we have the proper country name when we retrieve that information in the component did mount. So inside of component did mount, right over here, component did mount, and we get those rows of information, we can go ahead and look at the country name right here. So when we get that country name, which is located at the first position of that row in the first column of information, what we'll do over here is we're going to call a function called replace. Replace, what you can do is it takes in two parameters. The first parameter, we're kind of going to use a regular expression because we want to replace both of these quotes. By default, if I were just to say quote like that, and then go ahead and put an empty string and say replace it, it will actually only replace the first quote for Korea. So if we go find Korea, go find Korea over here on this side of the screen, you'll see that we still have that last quote over there. To get rid of that last quote, we need to actually put a /g. The /g won't work when we have it in this format over here. So to make this work, I need to say, hey, find me kind of regular expression here, find me the quote, and then globally replace every single instance of quote that you find. So if we come back over here, find Korea, now you can see that we're finding Korea. The Korea name, country name over here no longer contains a quote at the beginning and no longer a quote at the end. So just a little thing we need to do to clean up the data so that when we implement our own sort and we sort by total and then sort by country name over here, the country actually gets sorted properly. Now that we have that sort functionality working, let's go ahead and refactor that code. So we know that the handle on sort by total and the handle on sort by country name have identical code bases over here. The only difference is when we call countries.sort, we're either sorting by the country name or we're sorting by the country total. So to fix this, let's go ahead and add a method called handle on sort by. And handle on sort by over here, what we can do is make that equal to a function. So we'll just say equal to a function, and then that function that we're gonna make it equal to will take in some common information. So one thing that we need to take in is an event. Both of those methods take in an event. And since both of those methods take an event, they also the other difference between them is they need a sort by country name or a sort by total. So what is that? I guess that's the sort operation. Yeah, let's call it that. Sort operation. So right there, we have an event and a sort operation. So let's copy this code over here, paste it in. So we're using that event, which is perfect. This is still kind of grayed out because we're not using it. Sort operation will go over here, and all I have to do is paste that in over there. Our code is still compiling and we're good. So down over here on our handle on sort by, what we're going to do is we're going to use this method over here. So we'll go over here into this function here, pass in the event, and then pass in this.sort by country name. And then we can go ahead and delete that code. And let's also put a this over there, a little compilation error. And there we are. Let's go check the country. Well, country right there. So it sorts, and then we come back over here and we go there. So over here, let's go back to our handle on sort by total, and we'll do exactly the same thing. So I'm going to copy that this time. I'm going to come back over here. I will paste that in, and remember the only difference over here. So sort by total, and there you go. Perfect. Now I can sort by total and I can sort by country name, and our code is a little bit cleaner by removing that duplication. Next, we're going to implement selecting a country. If you recall from the example I showed you earlier, every time you click on a country, it'll be selected. And we're going to use a little styling to do that, to make it yellow, to make it visible that the country has been selected. So let's go ahead and get that going. Over here in the render method, we're going to go ahead and add on a on row selected. And we'll say on row selected is equal to this dot handle on row selected. There we go. And then let's go implement that inside of our country table first. So we'll copy on row selected, go into our country table, over here, go ahead and grab the onRowSelected. So every single time a row is clicked, we want to fire that event. So down over here on the TR, for every single country that gets clicked, we're going to implement an onClick. So onClick over here, we're going to do onRowSelected. So onRowSelected, it will execute. Well, we also need to do a little bit of styling over here so that we know the row has been selected. So in order to do that, we're going to go ahead and inside of our map function that we have over here, we're going to add some styling. So to expand on this map function right now, it's just doing a return automatically right over here with those braces. We're just going to put curly braces actually just around that part of the method right there. So just find that area, line 33 right there. And then what we have to do is, because we're not returning anything, we need to return this data here. I'm going to cut it, say return, open, close. There you go. Get rid of that semicolon. And there we are. So I just want a little return method over there. So everything is still working. Then I'm going to add a const style is equal to, and inside this style, I'm just going to define a style that we can use if the item is selected. So inside of style over here, I'm going to put background color, and background color will be equal to, we'll just keep it simple and say light yellow right there. And then right over here inside of our TR, what we're going to do over here is add some styling. So over here, inside of, we'll do it, actually let's just do it right after the key right there. Put that on a new line for now. Prettier will format that as soon as I click save. And then what we'll do over here is if country, if our country, and we're going to add a property to our countries called selected. So if our country is selected, what we're going to do is we're going to apply the style that we created. So that's the style that we created right above. We got our style here and we got our style above. If not, we won't apply any style to that object. So nothing will happen right now because we haven't added anything. Down over here for the onClick event, another important aspect of the onRowSelected is we need to know which country, which row of data was selected. So let's provide that information. We're going to wrap that in a function because we're going to have to execute it over here. And we only want it to execute. So this is going to set this function to onClick, so it's not executed. This is going to be executed inside. And inside here, we're going to pass the country. So there we are. We have our style over here. We only set the yellow style of the background color of the row if it's selected. Otherwise it doesn't. As you can see, our application is not applying any styles right now. And then an onClick event is when it's executed, it'll call onRowSelected with a country inside of it. So next, oops, hitting save there. Next, we'll go back to our country listing or our COVID application. Our COVID application has a method over here that we've created. You can see it's highlighted blue because it's not implemented yet. Handle onRowSelected. Let's go implement that handle onRowSelected over here. So handle rowSelected, we'll just put that right after the render method right over there. We're going to put that equal to handle rowSelected is equal to that. And remember that takes in a country. So we're going to grab a country over there. Now this method will be a little bit bigger than some of the other ones that we've done. The reason for that is in React, state is supposed to be immutable, which means you can't modify the objects that are in the previous state. We need to make new objects. So over here, let's go ahead and say const. We're going to make a copy of our array. So countries, just like we did before, we're going to first make a copy of our array of countries. That is the first thing we need to use. We use the spread operator, this.state.countries right there. And then once we got our new list of countries that we're going to be using, we have to find the object that we're updating. So let's go find where that object is located inside of that array. So inside the countries, because these are all copies of objects that we have, and we're not copies, these aren't copies, these are the actual objects used in the previous state. We need to make a copy of it. So first thing we need to do is find the index, find where that object is located. In order to do that, we're just going to put C over here to represent country, C.name. We're just going to look for that country by name because we know that's a unique value for every single one here. And our country over here that we're going to find, I'm going to rename this up here to country to update. And then down over here, country to update .name. So we're going to look for that country to update inside of the list, find where it's located. Once we find where that object is located, we're going to go ahead and create a new country. So we'll say const country is equal to, and then we're going to copy that information over. So we'll say name, country to update.name. So get the previous name of the country, and then go ahead and also update the total. So country to update.total. And then once we have the total over here, the last thing we need to do is a new property that we talked about that we haven't really added, but by default will be false. So over here, we're going to say the opposite of the value that it was before. So the selected value, we'll say country dot selected and get the opposite value. Well, we'll get the opposite value right here. So that doesn't exist. So the opposite value of the country to update right there. And get rid of that semicolon. So there we are. Country equals this new object. Has the same name, has the same total. The only difference is that we have to change the selected value over here. Then this new object that we create, well, we need to replace the object that's inside of the countries list. So back over here, we say countries. We go and find that object. So that will be the country index over there. And then say that in the list, go replace the object at this location with the new object that we created right there. Last thing we need to do is just go ahead and update that state. So this .setState takes in an object, takes in the countries, and there we are. Now we have our list updated. If we come back over here, we can go ahead and start clicking on countries and it'll be selecting. If we click it again, it unselects that country. So we've implemented the first step towards building our charts by selecting a country. Using our selected country information, we can now start to build the chart component. So the chart component will be taking in a list of countries, those countries that have been selected. So first thing, let's go update our state over here so that we have a property called selected countries. And selected countries will be equal to an empty array. That empty array, when we select the rows over here, the rows of information, we'll want to update that information. So what we're going to do over here is we will go ahead and very end over here, when we update the state, we're going to set the selected countries equal to the countries dot, selected. If it were that simple, we have to put a filter. So put a filter, and that filter over there will take in a parameter, which is the country. And then that country, we're going to check if the value is set to selected right there. So countries, filter it down to only the ones that have been selected. So using this information over here, the selected charts, right here towards the bottom of the page, around the render method, right above the country table, we're going to put our chart component. So let's go ahead and create that chart at chart.jsx. right there. And we'll just go ahead and import React and component, go ahead and create that chart. And we'll remove the state since we're not using that. Over here, we can display just a div that says chart for the time being. And then back over here in our COVID, what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this in a div here because we're going to be putting two elements here now. And we have the country table. And inside of that country table, we're also, or above that country table, we're going to have a chart. So the auto import didn't work there. So I'm going to have to go up to the top of the page over here. So just like this one over here, except it's going to be chart. There we are. We have a chart component that we import. And now it says chart above the page. As I mentioned, the chart component over here is going to have countries. We don't have to call that selected countries. All the chart knows is that it has countries, a list of countries. It doesn't care whether they're selected or not, just knows that they're there. So that information we're grabbing from our state over here, so selected countries, and then we'll pass selected countries into our chart over here. Inside of the chart, we can confirm that information over here by doing a console.log. And since that's a property that we're getting, let's go ahead and do a const, open those brackets, put in the name of the variable that we're getting, which is countries. And we are getting that from this.props, which we're destructuring over here, the countries. And then let's just go ahead and say countries dot length like that. So we'll just get the length of that variable. We'll see it's 0. So the reason you get these duplicate messages on the screen like this is because inside the index.js, the react.strict mode ends up repeating some of the console.log statements for a render. Just a little caveat of that, and that was something newly introduced about a month ago inside the default template when you use npx create react app. So going back to the chart.jsx here, we have our chart, we have our countries. It's showing 0, so whenever I click on a country, you can see what's selected. Even better, we can take this information and use console.table and then also pass the countries object in there. So right now there's no information, so we're not seeing anything. As soon as we click on one of these countries over here, we get that table. Remember, we get that duplicate info over there, which is okay. It gives us better error messages using the strict mode. And then we can see the information here, what it looks like, but we also see the information inside the table. So we're getting exactly the right info. We can scroll around, click on different countries. They will all get added to our list here as we scroll down and see that information. So there's all the countries that I have selected so far. All right, cool. So now that we got that working, what we can do is get rid of our console.log over here. And we want to create some charts. The chart that we're going to create is a pie chart, and we're going to be using charts.js. And we're going to be using the React version of that, which has taken the chart.js code and created components that we can consume in a React application. So in order to do that, we need to install two modules. Those two modules are npm React. So two modules that we need. We need charts.js. Oops. So let's go back over here. So I over here have my terminal running in one over here running my code. I'm going to pick terminal 2 over here, or if you don't have it running, you can click the plus sign over there to add another terminal. And what I'm going to do here is an npm install, so you can just put I'm going to install chart, so React chart.js-2, and then also install chart.js, which is a dependency of React chart.js-2. So once that's installed, we'll be able to import a pie chart and then consume that pie chart to go ahead and display our information. So let's go ahead over here and import pie from React chart.js 2. So there we are. We've imported that and saved our application. We refresh our application, or no, it's compiling still. So once that finishes compiling, we'll know if that was successful. So far we're successful. We're able to import this without error or any errors. So over here, inside of our render method, we can go ahead and start to use this pie chart. Before we can use this pie chart though, we need to get some information for it. So what I'm going to show you here is how to use this component. However, there is more documentation on React chart.js 2 on their GitHub page, and there's even more information on just how to use chart.js, which is a pretty awesome library. So over here, we're going to create a const object. We're going to create a data object, and this data object will be used by our pie chart. Oops. We're gonna want to put that actually inside of our render method over here, and we'll put that below our countries because that's the information that we're going to be using for our data. So for this chart that we're going to be building, we have labels. Those labels, as you saw earlier, are the information that you see at the top of the screen. So we're going to take the countries that we have over here, and those countries, we're going to map them to just names. Remember, our countries are objects that represent a total, a selected value, and a name. So what we want to do is just take that name. So right there. There we are. And if we want to even name this better, we can take these X's over here and call them countries. So it's a little bit more explicit as to what it is. It's a list of countries, and we're modifying each country to get the name and put this into this labels value that you'll see used in a couple of minutes. The data sets over here, this is the actual data that we'll be using to build the pie chart so that it can compare two numbers and decide how big of that piece of pie chart each country will represent. So data sets is an array, and that array over there takes in multiple data sets that you could have. But we only have one data set for this to keep things simpler. And inside that data set, you can have countries.map. So this is going to be the numbers. And then just as I did before, we're going to have country is equal to, and we're going to say country.name right there. I forgot the colon there. That's a mistake. There you go. So we have countries.map, and we get the country. Oh, you do not want the name. We want the total over there. So we have the country for the data. And then included with that, we need each one of these to look different. So we kind of need a background color. I don't have a list of, I could give it a dynamic list of colors and just set those colors. Since I know there's quite a few countries and you could possibly select all of them, what I've done is I just have a list of colors here that I actually kind of Googled. So let me just grab this list here. It's a big array. If you are interested in trying this code out, I will be posting on GitHub. I'm not sure if I can post these colors in the comment, as that's a lot of text. But here's the list of colors that I'm using, just a really, really big array of colors that I got here. So really, really big list of colors, probably more than the number of countries that I have. And then what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to give it the background colors array. So I don't want to put that array inside of an array, but there you go. So I got my colors object that I'm just consuming over here to get that list of colors. All right, so once we have that list of colors and we've created this data object, we can now go ahead and actually create our pie chart. Before we proceed further, one thing I'm going to do is when this page first loads and while it's waiting to get that data, what I'd like to do is kind of keep the page tiny for now and just have this area shrunk. So while that's happening, I'm just going to put an if over here that says if the countries countries.length oh, I had that right. Countries.length is equal to 0. Then what I'm going to do is just return an empty div right there. So just nothing displays on the screen while the spinner is going. So we got rid of that text and now we're all good. So over here inside the render method, we can get rid of that text. Now we can create our pie component, and that compile component. So we created a data object for a purpose, and that data object we're going to set over here. We're also going to give our chart a width of 100, and we're going to give it a height of 200. And options wise, because we want to maintain the aspect ratio, well, we don't want to maintain the aspect ratio, we want to use our width and height there. I'm going to set maintain aspect ratio to false. There we go. And then if we select our countries, here we are, we can go ahead and select countries. You can see these numbers, like France, a lot higher than Finland than that. So you can see it's getting those little pieces. As you built-in functionality here, as you highlight over each one of these pieces, it gives you more it gives you information that we're displaying. So you know which country is which. You can also look at the labels up over here. You can click on the labels to make them go away. Functionality here. And then you can also unclick our items there and then put them back if you so like. There you go. We could sort, we could add lots of countries, build our table here. We could change the width and height. We could play around with maintain aspect ratio. There's a lot of things you can do with this application. We could clear the selection if we wanted to. That would be easy code to add. Just add a button that sets the all the selected values for our countries to false, and just a lot that you can build upon this application and the data. And all this data, once again, is coming from the John Hopkins GitHub. We're consuming the CSV file, which is a comma separated value list, and then taking that information and transforming it into something that we could build for our application. If you like my video, please like, subscribe, and click that notification bell.